it's Louise Platt at Spiral Bright Insight. I'm a galactic and intuitive astrologer, and I want to talk about the upcoming full moon that is taking place on the 11th of June. It's at 8:43 a.m. in the UK, so adjust the timing for you wherever you are in the world. And it is a full moon in Sagittarius, so the moon is at 20 degrees 39 minutes of Sagittarius, with the sun in exact direct opposition in Gemini, 20 degrees 39 minutes. So just to remind you that when we're working with the full moon energy, this is a time of completion. We have come to the end of the lunar cycle and of the 28-day period, and we are working with coming into wholeness. Now, so we're working with completion, with endings, with release, with letting go. And because the sun is shining its full light on the surface of the moon, things are likely to be illuminated. We're able to see something that perhaps wasn't visible before. Now, the fact that the moon is in Sagittarius brings a highlight on Sagittarius themes. So when we're working with Sagittarius, this is the ninth sign in the zodiac. This is mutable fire. So, this can be really quite exciting, energetic energy, very much linked to the higher mind, to higher consciousness, to belief systems, to things like religion and philosophy and spirituality. It's also very much a sign of adventure, of exploration, and really kind of going beyond where you think is possible, sort of seeing beyond the horizon, being able to see the bigger picture. Although Sagittarius is represented by the archer, I often think of flight when I think of the Sagittarius energy, because it really is about being able to rise up and see things from a much higher, wider, broader perspective. This is very much this free spirit. Sagittarians and the energy won't necessarily like to be tied down because there is just so much to explore. Life is an adventure. There is also a very strong connection to truth and to knowledge and to higher wisdom, expansion, opportunity. Sagittarius ruling planet is Jupiter, and also we've been talking about Jupiter very recently because Jupiter is about to change signs. And of course, as the full moon is full in Sagittarius, the ruling Jupiter has just changed signs and moved into Cancer. So this really does strengthen the energy and the impact of this full moon. So we're here to really work with the light being shone on all these areas. They're likely to be under the spotlight. And of course, as a galactic astrologer, I will always look at the fixed stars and the cosmic points that are being activated in this chart. But before we go and look at the galactic chart, I wanted to have a quick look at the more traditional chart just to see and show you some of the things that are happening in it. As you can see, there is this sun opposing the moon, 20 degrees 39 minutes. Now, there's quite a lot going on in this chart. We can see that the ruler of this lunation, Jupiter, is at 0 degrees of Cancer. So this is on the world axis. This is one of the cardinal points, cardinal water. And very close to Jupiter is Mercury, who has passed Jupiter. They met at 29 degrees of Gemini and they moved into Cancer at pretty much the same time. So Mercury's going slightly quicker, so has moved ahead, but still is close enough to have an impact in this chart. Both Jupiter and Mercury are in square to Neptune and Saturn, who's still at the very early degrees of Aries. So we talked about the square of Jupiter to Saturn and Neptune, and there's a real sense here of tension and pressure being sort of created through the square. But whatever it is that Saturn and Neptune are working on, that are bringing to life, bringing to, into creation, that is very pioneering, very linked to the new identity and new sense of self that is coming through, it's important as Jupiter and Mercury that we take into account the wisdom of the past, of our ancestors, of what lies sort of beyond or behind us in terms of our roots and where we have come from. And also that whatever we do, we weave in a sense of compassion, that we make sure that, we are creating a safe and steady, stable platform and base from which this new energy can be created and burst forth. And also that we have a really strong emotional investment in it, because if the emotions are lacking, then it really doesn't always have the potential to kind of get going. So this is a really strong square that is active at this full moon. Now the moon itself is in a trine to Chiron and to Eris up here at 25 and 26 degrees of Aries, and also in a trine to Mars at 26 degrees of Leo. So this is a grand fire trine. And when we have a grand fire trine or a grand any element trine, it creates a really beautiful flow. The energies and sort of flow between these three planets. There's understanding, there's sort of synastry here because we are working with three fire signs. The flow, is very easy and there's little challenge, but what can happen with the fire, with a grand trine, is that there is no exit point. So the energy just keeps going round from one point to the next and back again on itself. And there is no break point. There's no exit point. So with the moon trine Mars and trine Chiron and Eris, there is a lot of energy here. There's a lot of fire, there's a lot of motivation, there's a lot of passion, a lot of drive, very much coming into the heart space with Mars in Leo and really reminding us of a strong warrior energy, which also comes through Eris and Chiron both in Aries, with Mars in trine to these two planets which are both in his ruling sign, and then with the extra sort of added higher perspective energy and freedom, optimism, joyful energy of the moon in Sagittarius. So whatever is coming through at this full moon, whatever light, whatever is being shown, whatever has been exposed, whatever is being brought to light at this time, it is likely to perhaps sort of get people quite fired up, quite energized, quite angered potentially. Eris is the goddess of chaos and discord, and she will fight. She wants to be heard. She will not be silenced. And if she sees that somebody is being sort of exiled or sidelined or ostracized, then she will not stand for it. She's going to call that out, particularly, if these people are vulnerable and they have been manipulated or controlled in some way. And with Chiron next to Eris as well, this is likely to maybe trigger or open up some wounds which may have been there for lifetimes, all around the identity, all about the right to exist, to express your true self. And with Mars in this trine, this adds an extra element of fire and passion and determination and courage, but we also have to bear in mind with the moon here, we are likely to be feeling more emotional as well. So there may be something coming to completion at this time, but it is likely to create some type of emotional outburst and possibly an emotional war cry is kind of what comes to mind there. Now the sun in Gemini is in a trine to Atlantis, which is down here, Atlantis at 22 degrees of Libra. And that feels really quite intriguing because with the sun in Gemini, there's information coming to light at this time. New understandings, new mindsets, new perception, new stories perhaps. A different perspective that we need to perhaps understand, or a different point of view. But with the trine to Atlantis, it may actually be related to our past, to our heritage, to our ancestral lines, to wisdom that has been held in other lifetimes, in other timelines that is relevant now. And with the sextile to the moon in Sagittarius, again, there's a really strong focus on wisdom here in this chart, but just coming back to the fact that Mercury and Jupiter are in the early degrees of Cancer. Again, that it just feels so ancestral, so primordial. Whatever it is that we are kind of being shown or reminded or asked to remember, it has roots and origins in, in very ancient times indeed. Now, Jupiter and Mercury are in a sextile to to Venus in Taurus. Again, that feels very special because whatever it is that is coming to light, or that we're connecting to, that we've got a really strong emotional connection to potentially, that is going to make us feel safe, that is going to make us feel secure, nurtured, nourished and held, this has a link to the divine feminine. Because Venus in her home sign now of Taurus is reminding us of the wisdom and the gifts and the opportunities held within the body, within the divine wisdom that we can access through our senses, through being embodied, through slowing down and coming into a much more stable and grounded state of being. And Venus is opposing Black Moon Lilith at 8 degrees of Scorpio. Also fairly close to an opposition with Haumea and Hecate, but it's actually Black Moon Lilith that is speaking the loudest at this time. And this really feels like the shadow, the deep sort of dark, wild, sacred feminine who has had to stay hidden, or who has been forced to remain hidden because she was too powerful. And in Scorpio, this is about healing gifts that may have been kept in the shadows, hidden, repressed, again for millennia, for lifetimes, for across many different timelines, because they posed a threat. But the fact that Venus is opposing Black Moon Lilith at the time of this new moon, full moon, where we're really thinking about wisdom and setting wisdom free. It's like we have this key to the ancient knowledge through the Grand Fire Trine. This feels like the rebirth or the rising of the divine feminine. And, there is no place to hide. There is no way she can be repressed or suppressed this time, because it is just becoming so powerful. And it's like recognizing that this is actually part of our past. And we may have been separated and disconnected or cut off from it, but it is time for this ancient wisdom and this energy signature to rise again and to take its rightful place, because this is part of what happens next. This is part of the new earth. Venus at 5 degrees of Taurus is in a square to Pluto at 3 degrees of Aquarius. Pluto is still retrograde. So again, whatever it is that Venus is shining a light on through this opposition to Black Moon Lilith, the T-square created by Pluto is making sure that this is something that is coming up from the depths, something that is being exposed, something that affects humanity, that affects the evolution and transformation and metamorphosis of humanity, something that can take us into the future, but we need to very much bring the past with us. Now, the moon in Sagittarius is also in a square to Nessus and to the nodal axis. So we just quickly talk about the nodal axis. Again, whatever is being sort of highlighted, exposed, revealed, announced at this time of the full moon, it is absolutely designed to set us on, to align us with our path forward. Something that was going to help us release the past with the South Node in Virgo, but move forward towards the North Node in Pisces, which is very much about letting go, stepping into unity consciousness, becoming much more aligned with all that is. And much more spiritual approach as well, coming into a deeper connection with the higher self, with spirit, with source, as this is part of our remembering, as we reconnect to the truth, which helps us to move forward. Now, Nessus is really interesting because this is an asteroid which he's a centaur, and he was linked to the underworld. And whenever we see Nessus in the chart, there is often stories or past connections to trauma and abuse. It often points to something that has been hidden, that sits in the ancestral line. So this can be abuse or trauma that is handed down through the generations, often to be repeated through generation after generation, but when we see it in the chart in this lifetime in particular, it is often an indicator of someone who is here to break that cycle, to say no more, it stops here. And in doing so, in breaking that cycle, we are able to free sort of lifetimes of trauma, but also generations of ancestors who may still be attached, who may be still sort of trapped in this cycle, in this energy, in this residual sort of memory of trauma. Now, there can be links to poison, to manipulation, to control. So, this is quite dark energy, but the fact that the moon is in a square to Nessus, and Nessus is still very close to the North Node. The North Node is going to come around and meet Nessus in the coming weeks. Again, this is a spotlight on potentially setting us free from generations, lifetimes of some form of trauma, abuse, control, manipulation, or poisoning. And of course, poison doesn't always have to be literal. It can be sort of poison of the mind, poisoned energy fields. There's lots of different ways to translate that and interpret it, but that does feel very, very poignant and certainly something to be aware of. And the final thing, there's always lots that we could pick out in these charts, but the final thing I wanted to highlight for the purpose of this video is the fact that Isis and Uranus are incredibly close. Now, Uranus and Isis are going to meet in an exact conjunction the day after the full moon on the 12th. So they will be exact. They are at the same degree at this time, but not quite to the exact minute. So this is really, really interesting. Isis is one of the very ancient Egyptian goddesses. She represents the mother, but also magic, protection, divine feminine energy. She is able to resurrect people from the dead, to pull together all the dismembered and scattered fragments and parts and aspects of the self. This is what she represents in astrology, just taking the story from her myth when she was able to sort of revive or resurrect her husband who had been dismembered and cut into pieces by his brother. So this is a very, very powerful, very magical energy, all linked to wisdom, bringing us in touch with grief, but also the ability to reclaim our power by pulling all the sort of scattered and disconnected pieces together. And of course, if we're thinking about with the sun in Gemini, this can be strands. This Gemini is often for me about strands that can become separate, because by nature a strand is a separate piece. But with the fact that Isis is coming together with Uranus in this chart, it's like we are getting this opportunity almost to bring all these parts together to create wholeness, which is going to lead to some sort of awakening. And with Uranus involved, it isn't always going to be comfortable. Uranus can really sort of rock the boat, create discord, create chaos and disruption, but with a view to bringing something to light, or bringing something sort of post storm that is much better, that is much serves a much higher purpose, and that is fit for where we are going. So Isis, very linked to the ancient divine feminine wisdom, ancient Egypt. We've got Atlantis here in the chart as well. Isis and Uranus also trine the Sphinx. So again, more ancient wisdom. We've been talking about Cancer. This chart is just full of a resurrection of the ancient ways, very linked to the divine feminine wisdom, creating a container for something that is going to hold us as we grow, as we move forward, as we start to embrace and remember the power that we all hold. Finally, before I just pop out of this chart, Verena, which is this as this dwarf planet here, is in a square to Black Moon Lilith. So Verena in Leo, very close to Rogue Cancri actually, which is a beautiful diamond star in galactic astrology, is squaring Black Moon Lilith. And Verena is the god of order and divine justice. So he is very much here to make sure that morality is adhered to, that the laws are adhered to, those who may be corrupt and contravening divine justice and law and order are held accountable. And with the square to Black Moon Lilith, again, you know, coming back to this divine feminine, what has been held in the shadow, what may have, you know, not been given a voice or not being allowed to express herself and her full power and stand in her power. It feels like the square, you know, something has got to give. Something is going to really break through at this full moon. That's kind of what it feels like. And the fact that they're both the number 8 as well, that adds an extra element of power. That number 8 representing strength and manifestation and power and infinity. Sort of what goes around comes around. There's a real sort of karmic energy here. Varuna will cast judgment. If there is a wrongdoer, or if there has been corruption or there has been injustice, Varuna will cast judgment. And he is the all-seeing eye, so he can see what is going on, even if it is not apparent, even if it isn't necessarily been shown on the surface. Varuna knows, because Varuna can see everything. He exposes secrets. So that feels very relevant. And of course, Varuna is in a T-square with Venus as well. So this is very much judgment being cast on situations potentially where the divine feminine has been abused or distorted or controlled in some way. And, you know, again, I don't really need to go into too much detail to give you an idea of what that might relate to. Let's talk about some of the fixed star connections. So the main fixed star of this particular chart is Rasalhague, which is a star in the Ophiuchus constellation. So Ophiuchus is, apologies if I've pronounced that wrong, is the 13th sign. So this can be quite controversial, and there's been lots of astrologers and people talking about, are there 12 or are there 13 signs in the zodiac? For me, I see Ophiuchus as the 13th sign and serving as a bridge between what we know, what we have always sort of seen, what we've been taught, what we've been brought up with, and what we've relied on and seen as a basis for our astrological knowledge and how we approach astrology, to what lies ahead. Perhaps almost, you could see it as from the 3D into the 5D. Of course, astrology isn't really 3D at all, but that's kind of how I see it, as a bridge between kind of where we are now and where we are going, and sort of the future and the higher dimensions. So this is very strong serpent energy as well, very strong link to the underworld, to Kundalini, which obviously is that potential, that sort of the energy that sits often trapped in the base of the spine, but when accessed, it rises up and activates and awakens all the different energy centers and the chakra points in the body, ultimately leading to enlightenment and an awareness and a new way of seeing things. So the fact that the moon in Sagittarius is sitting very close to this star feels really, really pertinent. It feels really relevant and really exciting. Strong connections, obviously, with the serpent, the underworld, to creation energy, but also destruction. So an acknowledgement that whenever things are born and created, something has to die. And we've been talking about that quite recently in the videos that I've shared, where, people are shedding, people are having to let go, people are purging, but there's also a big release, which creates a huge amount of grief and also resistance, because things aren't always easy. We don't always want to let go of things, of people, of situations. But this energy is really supporting that. Very linked to the divine feminine as well. Again, the serpent energy, the power, that ancient wisdom, mystical, esoteric knowledge that may have been suppressed, hidden for many, many lifetimes, again, is about to be released, be set free, so that it can come back into our world and we can start working with it to help us grow, evolve and expand. Very creative energy. And also, again, as the Gemini signature, in totality, this is truth. So it's a light is being shone on some element of truth. Now it could be anything, obviously, but the truth is also helping to set us free through this Sagittarius full moon. So the sun in the opposite side of the chart is conjunct Nihal. Now Nihal is one of the stars that I personally am very close to, because it is conjunct my midheaven, and this is a blue ray frequency. So Nihal is in the Lepus constellation, Lepus being the rabbit or the hare. Instantly we have a connection to magic, very also linked also to Merlin energy, to the magician, to shape shifting, also connection to nature, to the indigo children as well as the blue ray, and to spell casting, to working with magic, to being able to, I guess, manipulate energy, but also, you know, use it to create, to manifest, to bring about something new. I also love when we're working with Nihal, there is a bridge between science and logic and the heart and the higher mind and the 5D and spirituality. So it's about fusing these two sort of states of being and tools together in order to effect change. And it can bring deep sensitivity if you have got strong Nihal in your chart, deep empathy, which again, you know, feels important because, again, with the fact that the moon's ruler is Jupiter in the early degrees of Cancer. You know, full moons are always emotional and highly sensitively charged times in the lunar calendar. But with the Sun and Nihal, you know, this is going to perhaps add an extra layer of sensitivity and empathy to whatever it is that we are seeing, that we are learning, that we are being shown at this time. Now, there are two further stars conjunct the Sun. They are Bellatrix in the Orion constellation and Capella in the Auriga constellation. So together these create what I call a cosmic trinity. And ultimately it is about understanding that, you know, we have turned up, or we found ourselves in this situation on planet Earth where we are effectively living in separation. We have become disconnected from the truth of who we are. We have become disconnected from our souls, from our higher selves. Not all of us, and not completely, but there has been a veil, there has been an attempt to hide, to numb, to dumb down, to conceal the truth. And, you know, this separation has caused so much trauma, so much conflict, so much anxiety over millennia. And when we're working with these stars, and, you know, obviously this is the Orion karma, you know, that has triggered wars, the power, you know, the elite, the patriarchy, and it has played out in many different lifetimes, in many different cultures, and many different parts of the universe. You know, this is about bringing a focus to that reality, and really working out how can we push through, how can we move through the separation and disconnection, how can we come to a state where we remember who we are, where we suddenly realize that we weren't disconnected at all, we weren't separated, it was just an illusion, it was a veil, it was a lie, it was control, it was manipulation, it was distortion, always in order to keep us in one way of being, which is ultimately disempowered and small, so that we wouldn't remember who we were, we wouldn't remember where we came from and how powerful we were, and how ultimately we have the ability to create our own reality, although we have forgotten. So we tend to stay in sort of victim mode. And again, I'm not casting a judgment, you know, this is just kind of what humanity appears to have experienced collectively over, you know, millennium and eons of time. So Bellatrix is the spiritual warrior. You know, this is bringing the Orion energy, the hunter, the hero to the fore. Again, with the sun shining a light, we're getting that solar energy, infusing Nihal, infusing Bellatrix, infusing Capella. And with the Orion, with Bellatrix, the spiritual warrior, this is very strong witch energy, using spells, using words to craft, to either to empower or to manipulate. There's a choice here, because this is a star in Gemini. You know, there are two ways to go. Which way are we going to choose, or are we going to choose the middle ground, which ultimately leads us to the opposing part of the chart, which is Sagittarius, where we come together and see that we are actually unified, and that there is a bigger picture, there is a higher perspective, and we don't need to remain separate, we don't need to remain small and controlled, essentially. So Bellatrix, you know, this is the spirit, the female warrior, and the divine feminine energy is rising up through Bellatrix. She's very much evolved, or people with Bellatrix in their charts will often play a big role, an important role in dismantling sort of illusion, dismantling corruption, calling things out. This is very magical energy. It reminds us how potent and how powerful our voice is, but also how powerful words are, and how we can use them again to destroy or to create. You know, words form our reality, as do thoughts. And this is kind of what Bellatrix is here to remind us, and how powerful our mind is. Again, this is really supportive for problem solving and seeing a problem where perhaps we didn't recognize one that was there before. And then when we bring Capella in, this is the Charioteer. Auriga is the Charioteer. So there's a lot of speed. There's an allusion to, alluding to a journey, you know, it's where we are going, which comes through with Auriga and Capella. But also, this is really beautiful because although we're working with Gemini, which is the mind, Capella brings in this beautiful energy of the shepherd, of the protector, of guidance, of peace, of caring, of nurturing. Capella also reminds us of the importance of inclusivity and moving beyond division and separation to sort of the whole, unifying and seeing that everybody has a role to play, a contribution to make. And just because someone is different, it doesn't mean that they are to be feared, that everybody has something valuable to offer. And often, you know, if we can approach a situation with that in mind, you know, the fear starts to dissolve and disintegrate. And often it's the fear that causes the conflict and the division in the first place, because if there's a fear or a lack of understanding, that could create real issues. So Capella also invites us to be curious and to ask questions and maybe to question what we are being told. So the collection of these three stars together is ultimately about moving from division and separation towards unity, towards inclusivity, perhaps having to fight for that, having the courage. You know, Orion is the hunter, is the hero. You know, he is chasing after something, but this is part of the process that we need to go through, and the sun is really shining a light on that at this time. Now Uranus is now conjunct the Pleiadian star cluster, so this is the Seven Sisters. So again, creating some disruption, some breakthrough, some awakening that is going to help us access fifth dimensional reality, almost awakening the Pleiadian connections among us as part of our ancestral lineage and our memories, our galactic memories, our galactic family. So there are other fixed stars in the chart, but those are the two main ones that I wanted to talk about today for the purpose of this video. So I hope that what I have shared has given you some food for thought, perhaps, you know, triggered or unlocked something new, a new perspective or some new ideas. Let's see how things play out. It is powerful times that we are moving through. If you've got any feedback, something has resonated or has really struck a chord or sort of given you an aha moment, please do share in the comment box below. Please, what I've shared has been useful or valuable or helpful in some way, please do share the video and like it. It helps with the algorithms. As always, if you want to be on my mailing list and be the first to hear about and what I'm up to and the different projects I am in the process of working on and hopefully about to launch very soon, you can sign up for that on my website, spiralbright.co.uk. If you want to work with me and book a reading, I have my services listed on my website as well. I've got a super thanks button. Always very, very grateful for any contributions, donations to my work and to keeping this channel going. And yeah, just a reminder about my Uranus in Gemini Voices from the Stars report, which is now available to purchase for £8. It's a 12-page document, and I talk about the themes that we are likely to be working with as Uranus moves into Gemini, the fixed stars that Uranus is going to activate as he moves through Gemini over the next 7 years, how it might show up through the different houses depending on where Gemini is in your own natal chart, and lots more. So you can access that. There's a link to a page with information about that in the description box below. And yeah, if that's something you're interested in, hopefully it will give you some insight as to what we have coming up, because Uranus moving into Gemini is a very, very important transit, and it's a big part, it's a big astrological event for 2025, along with all the other ingresses and the planets moving. You know, this is just the next one, but again, it's Uranus, so it is a big deal. So I'm going to leave it there. Thank you as always for supporting me, for watching my content. If there's anything that you would like me to cover and perhaps, you know, talk about in the future, please do feel free either to send me an email or just comment on the video, because I am always sort of open. I do tend to be guided. You know, some days I don't feel like recording anything. Other days I get lots of downloads and lots of sort of inspiration. I think I have to come on and talk about that. So if there is anything that you want me to cover in particular, I am very open to suggestions, obviously, if I can, and it feels like something that I could talk about, then, you know, I'd be more than happy to do that. So, you know, let's kind of make this a collaboration, an interactive thing as we move forward, because I think it really helps to know that, you know, we're all working together, and ultimately, although we're all in individual situations and our experiences are all very different, we are also very linked, very connected, and a lot of what we are going through seems very aligned with the next person. So as always, thank you so much, and sending lots of love, and I'll be back soon.